You have a PhD in economics from George Mason, right?
Yep.
And what year did you graduate?
2015, 2016, 2016, I think.
Yeah, and most people go get a PhD. They want to become academics. Was that ever on your radar?
I wanted to too. I wanted to fight the battle of ideas and change the world for the better.
Yeah. And what happened? Were you disillusioned with academia? Did you just think that there was other
Yeah,
opportunity?
academia is pretty dumb. It's after you like I don't know. I went there reading like Mises, Hayek. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
you're these big debates that influence society, and then you get to graduate school, and it's like, how do I learn a technique that can measure the change in whatever in this small area that nobody cares about? And then maybe in 20 years, after I get tenure and I build up a reputation, I can think interesting thoughts and talk about interesting ideas.
Yeah.
And that was not very attractive. George Mason is a wonderful place intellectually, but as a PhD econ program, it's mid tier. Right, very few George Mason graduates get to teach at universities, and I was not a good graduate student. I'm a mediocre economist,
Mm.
and so I kind of rolled the dice and decided to pursue charter cities, which was a few rough couple of years kind of coming out of graduate school, but seems to have worked out since.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. You say academia is dumb. Yeah, I have sort of a similar experience. I went in studying international relations. I was interested in like World War I, World War II, like why has war declined? The big questions, and you're sort of pushed into have some statistical model that can explain like slight increase in military spending or what determines support for war under this circumstance or that circumstance. Just really, I mean, they make it it seems like similar in economics. They make it as small as possible.
Yeah.
And then if you want to study like the
I think this I don't think this is unique to like academia per se. I think almost all American institutions are and like professions have become somewhat calcified and
yeah,
resistant to outsiders and built on this a degree of kind of internal rent seeking. And I anywhere that doesn't have a basically relatively quick feedback loop
yeah,
has so if you look at a lot of I don't know professions as well that aren't academia. And we've obviously seen this with the public health profession over the last 18 months. They've basically failed on every margin, even though they're not like some of them are in academia, but a lot of them aren't. They're in government or they're in private institutions, and literally all of them failed. Not all of them, but like I don't know, 80% of them failed. And so I don't think it's unique to academia per se, but at least given my experience there, it was particularly prominent and particularly discouraging of my I don't know of what I consider to be my interests.
me and you are a little bit similar in that we both started out thinking about an academic career. We sort of both became kinds of intellectual entrepreneurs. Do you have any advice for anybody out there who maybe is thinking about academia or who's been in academia and who wants to go out there and do something else? Would you encourage? I mean, would you tend to encourage that? And if so, like, is there any general advice you can give?
Yeah. Well, if you're considering academia, my advice would be don't. If you're considering like what an alternative looks like, I think that is much more difficult. I was definitely lucky. I think things have worked out fairly well. I also worked pretty hard, and I think was reasonably careful about my decisions. But I was definitely lucky as well. The way I think about it is over the next, well, like one, just thinking about a basic US context, right? US college age population peaked 3 years ago. It is now in decline. You have Republican governors who have basically declared war on universities because university departments tend to be very highly democratic. Those wars will probably continue. The universities are probably going to lose, at least on some margin. So, just from a purely like self interest perspective, universities are probably not a good place to be. The other kind of broad piece of framing advice I would think about is we're in the mid stage of um, the internet as an industry. So industries, if you look at electricity, right, it took 80 years to go from like first switch and lights to like widespread penetration in at least in the U.S. in rural areas. The internet will probably be about the same, right, with a 60 to 80-year time horizon. We're about 30 years into the internet, so that means we have another probably 20 to 40 years left. And so what I would do is identify an area that is in somewhere related or adjacent to the internet that is in a growth phase and just become a expert in that. And it will be very difficult the first 2 to 3 years, but if you have the right ideas and if you engage the right stakeholders, after struggling initially, it will become very, very lucrative. And you become a relevant expert in that. You become the person who knows everything about that. You make the right relationships. And given the fact that we're still in a growth phase of a major industry, if you carve out that niche for yourself, it will be very promising. So that's my advice.